migration. Mostly we look at net migration, which is the net of in-migration and out-migration. And in a way, the task of population projections is easier than in many other disciplines because the population can change only through these three parameters. But each of them is difficult enough to model, to understand the drivers, and to forecast. So the future paths of all these three factors are uncertain. And that is why we need to produce some sort of probabilistic population projections. Many of you may be familiar with the UN population projections. They give you a high, medium, and low variant. And what they do, they assume only the fertility rates to be different, half a child higher than the median or half a child lower than the median variant. And otherwise, they apply the identical mortality and migration assumptions. This is an acceptable approximation when we look at population growth and size, because their fertility is by far the most important determinant. It becomes more problematic when we look at indicators of population aging, as I will soon show. Now, what we are doing at IIASA, we are combining truly probabilistic population projections, 2,000 simulated paths, and here you see sort of the randomly chosen first 9 paths. And in these random projections, we draw from uncertainty distributions of fertility, mortality, and migration, and combine them in what we call a cohort component projection model at the level of 12 world regions. Now you see the first random lines show you all kinds of different futures. So the world future is not just a straight line, as some of the medium variants seem to imply. You have at the bottom a black line where the population even peaks before reaching 8 billion and then go down, and you have another line, the brown one, that goes up to 12 billion before declining, and then you have some that even go up and down. The only thing we know for sure from these graphs is that over the next 20, 30 years, we will definitely have some further increase because of the momentum of population growth embedded in the age structure today. Now, how can we assume that fertility, that the birth rates are likely to decline in countries where they are still high? And this is based on the so-called theory or paradigm of demographic transition. It is a universal process of modernization, with different countries currently being at different stages of the same process. That's important to recognize, so we don't say these phenomena are qualitatively different. African people are just very different in some way than from the Europeans or the Asians. No, we are just at different stages of something that seems to be a universal process of human development, of human history, if you want. And in this process, first the death rates fall due to better sanitation and medical advance, but the birth rates at the same time tend to remain high because they are culturally determined. Most cultures are pro-natalist traditionally. They want many children. And this combination of declining death rates and high birth rates results in very high population growth. And only after some lag further on, then the birth rates start to decline, and that will lead to low or even negative population growth and population aging. It's important because this is really one of the few social theories that seem to have predictive power. So far, every society in the world has at least started this process. And it is used, therefore, as a basis for projections. Now, just to illustrate this with the island of Mauritius, I happened to study there for some time and write a book about this island. It has beautiful data. You see in blue the death rates, and in red the birth rates per thousand of the population. And you see that from 1875 up to about 1945, there were strong fluctuations at about the same level. So this peak in the blue rate is the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919. And then in 45, something dramatic happens. The death rates fall precipitously. And this was like in many developing countries after World War II. Antibiotics were introduced, there was progress in malaria eradication, and public health just significantly improved. And you see at the same time the birth rates even went up, which is also something you frequently see because cultures have a tendency to be pro-natalist, and the women are now healthier and better health status. They actually had more children than before. And then it is only with some decades of delay that the birth rates also fall, and you see this huge gap between the death rate and the birth rate. That's the rate of population growth, which in Mauritius was even 2 to 3%, very rapid growth. And then you see between 65 and 75, the birth rates declined very rapidly. Mauritius actually had one of the world's fastest fertility declines due to a combination of massive efforts in female education and government-sponsored, strictly voluntary family planning campaigns. So they were very effective in Mauritius. Actually, only recently another country had a more rapid decline in fertility, and I'm sure if you don't know it, you're probably not going to guess it. It's the Islamic Republic of Iran that so far had the world's most rapid fertility decline, from a fertility level of about 7 children per woman in 1984 to below replacement level today, about 2.0, 1.9. And this again has been accompanied with very rapid expansion of female education and strictly voluntary reproductive health and family planning service provision, even in rural areas. So this all translates into the distribution that actually John Schellenhuber has shown you. We're currently updating this. This is the most recent one that was published last year in Nature, actually, under the title, The Coming Acceleration of Global Population Aging. And we see indeed there's like the trumpet of uncertainty opening, and the median, with half the cases above and half below, is almost reaching the 9 billion mark, and then decline thereafter. But the picture is very different in different parts of the world. Here we see Eastern Europe, and there's little uncertainty that the population in Eastern Europe will decline. And over this 100 years, it may even be cut in half, decline to half its previous level. But again, there is some uncertainty, but there's no uncertainty about the decline itself. I wanted to give you a little more insight about the details of demographic analysis, but we don't have the time, so I'll just show you. This is an age pyramid with the women right and the men to the left-hand side, sorted by age. And this pyramid for Austria, which is very similar to Germany or Switzerland here in Central Europe, really gives you the history of starting from birth deficit associated with World War I and then World War II, and then dominated by the baby boom, the big cohorts born during the 1960s. And then projected to 2030, you see here a probabilistic population projection, where the orange area gives you the 95% confidence interval, the green, the inner 60%. And again, you see that the most uncertain part is the future number of children, because we don't know what the future birth rate is going to be. Then for the young adults, the uncertainty range is mostly associated with migration uncertainty, how many people come and go. Then for the baby boom generation, it's very little uncertainty, but uncertainty increases again at the very high end, because we don't know whether there is an upper limit to the human life expectancy, and whether or not what will happen to old age mortality is a big open question. And this is reflected in this chart, which gives you the proportion in Western Europe of the population above the age of 80. At the moment, only 3% of the population in Western Europe are above the age of 80. And over the coming decades, this is going to increase by maybe a little to 5% or 7%, but the real thing is happening in the second half of the century. Depending on whether we are already close to the upper limit of a human life expectancy, as some scholars claim, then we'll be somewhere in the lower range here, maybe 10, 15% of the entire population above age 80. But if the so-called optimists are right, and we will see continued increases in life expectancy at the same rate as in the past, or even accelerating due to medical progress, then we may end up in a society where 1/3 or even 40% of the entire population are above the age of 80. Well, some people question whether this is an optimistic scenario, and my answer to this is, well, this is only likely to happen if disability-free life expectancy is increasing at the same speed, that these 80-year-olds of the year 2100 will be still very active. Okay, now let's switch on. Sub-Saharan Africa, very rapid population growth, predicted tripling, if not even quadrupling. This is the other side of the coin. Let's look at education. Here you see 3 African countries, and you see child mortality by mother's education.